When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome, everyone, to the G-Note Podcast. I am your host, Jason Spicy G. Goldman, and I'm a Grammy-winning record producer, arranger, and musician. I've been a music professor at USC for over 22 years, and I am most known for writing and producing music for the iconic crooner Michael Bublé over the past 2 decades. This is a podcast for musicians who want advice and strategies on navigating the music industry. If you're not a musician but a music fan, I promise there is plenty in here for you as well. On this pod, we talk all things music. On today's pod, we are talking about picking and choosing your battles wisely. Let's go. Welcome back, folks. Today we are talking about the old saying, pick and choose your battles wisely. If I have to think of one phrase that I'm always thinking about when a possible conflict arises, it's this particular phrase. Not every battle, as we all know, is worth fighting. Remember, you don't need to win every battle. The goal is obviously to win the war. You're probably thinking by now, how does this relate to musicians? Well, let me tell you, many times throughout a musician's career, including my own, you'll have to decide if you should stand up and hold your ground for something or just let it go. And the key in all of this is really thinking about the outcomes of a situation, the pros and the cons, if you will. In today's episode, to illustrate my point, I thought it would be fun for me to give you 3 scenarios and have you think about what you would do in those scenarios. And then I will give you what I would do and why I would do it. And by the way, I'm well aware that there's no right or wrong answer, per se. It's more about the outcome you're hoping to achieve. By the way, in case you're keeping score, these scenarios are roughly some of the scenarios that I've gone through. I've kind of manipulated them a little bit so that I could get my point across more. But I think you'll get the gist of it, and I think it'll be a fun exercise. So here we go. Scenario 1. You're working with an artist, and let's say they are signed to a major record label with a decent following. And the artist has an idea for a song. They go ahead and they sing you a melody and have, at least half or maybe 3/4 of the lyrics to the song. The artist does not know how to write music, though. So the artist sings the melody to you and the lyrics that they have, and you ask them, what are the chords? And the artist says, they don't know how to write chords. So you say, okay, let me write some song. Let me write some harmony, some chords. And the artist agrees. So you create the harmony of the song. And now the song is complete. Let's say the artist finished the lyrics because they had 3/4. So what you added was the harmony. The next day, you have a session with a known producer. And the artist says, hey, I want to do one of the songs that I've written. That's an original. So the producer, knowing the artist, says, well, who did you write the song with? And the artist says, what do you mean? I just wrote a song. The producer says, you don't know how to write music, so someone had to co-write it with you. The producer says, who wrote the harmony? So you, being in the room, raise your hand and you say you did. So the producer says, okay, so this is a co-write. But the artist doesn't like that. the artist feels that because you only wrote the harmony to the song, that it shouldn't really be a co-write because they wrote the melody and the lyrics. And technically, as a side note, you can only really copyright lyrics and melody. So the producer says that's not how it works. You either wrote the song or you co-wrote it. In this case, it's a co-write. So you can either split the song or maybe just pay him off to own the song outright. So the artist, obviously agitated, says, fine, I'll just pay you a few $100. Is that cool? Now, you have two choices, right? You take the few $100 and get the artist and not get the artist riled up, or you say, no, I think a co-write is more appropriate and risk getting the artist upset. So what would you do? Here are my thoughts. Because the artist is signed to a major label, I would much prefer the co-write than the few $100. Even if it were 1,000, I would prefer the co-write. Remember, the label is motivated to make something happen and will very likely spend the money to push the album or song. If the song does well, either via fans or it gets placed in a film or TV show, you would definitely be making more money than what is being offered to you. That being said, the main dilemma here is that the artist seems to be upset by this. If you don't go with the artist's idea of letting him pay you off and he gets mad at you, it could potentially, you could potentially lose out on a ton of future work and likely way more work and money in the long run than the song would actually bring you. So here's what I would do. In the moment, I would say, let's go with whatever you think is fair. Here's what that does. This will make the artist feel a couple of things. Number one, they'll feel like they're being respected. You're giving them the option. Number two, they'll feel like they are the boss and now have kind of flexed in front of the producer. Now, even though they are kind of the boss, they're not usually totally the boss, but you want them to feel like they're the boss. I mean, they're the artist. And three, this also puts some pressure on the artist later to do the right thing. The bottom line here is, guys, is yes, this is complete bullshit. It's a co-write. We all know that. We're not really debating that here. That's not really would be going through my mind anyways. The fact that we are even debating this is truly unbelievable. But this is how it goes at least 50% of the time. So sometimes you have to hold your breath and go with the flow and keep food on the table by going with something you know is not necessarily right. You'll hopefully end up gaining more trust from the artist and come across as a team player, and the future benefits will likely outweigh this one co-write. So to reiterate, what I would say is whatever you think is fair and put it on the artist. We don't even know if this particular song will make an album or even be released. So it's better to put it on the artist and take that risk. If they feel that paying you $300 or $1,000 is fine, I think you're just going to have to eat it up, and I probably would eat it as well. Because I would just be losing too much work in the future. And if the artist continues to gain momentum and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the relationship will be better and more secure. And in the long run, it's going to be a better move for you. So that would be my answer for this particular scenario. Okay, scenario number 2. An artist hires you to write 5 big band arrangements for them. Now, obviously, I do a lot of big band writing, so I'm using the big band world right now because this actually has mostly happened to me in a very similar scenario, as I mentioned at the top. So the artist hires you to write the 5 big band arrangements, and you agree on a fee of $15,000 for the 5 arrangements. Now, just FYI, when you do arrangements for people, you write the chart, you give them a copy of the PDF, you'll send them a copy of the PDF of the score and all of the parts for each instrument. And once that is sent, the job is complete. So remember, you're not actually recording anything for them. You're not going to play them anything. They just will have this chart. So after you send the charts, the artist says, oh, I needed one of these songs to have strings on it. Now, keep in mind, if you've been listening to the pod, you know that big band typically has 17 musicians, which is 5 saxophones, 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, guitar, piano, bass, drums. So now they're saying, the artist is saying, well, I needed one to have strings on it. Now, keep in mind, the artist never mentioned that to you. Or she might have mentioned it in passing and you just don't recall. So either way, you look through all of your texts and your email communications and you find nothing that said the artist wanted strings. So what do you do now? Here are my thoughts. You could go back to the artist and tell them that you don't recall them ever mentioning that and that you couldn't find, that in any communication that you've had with them, like emails, texts. And this in turn could spark a debate as the artist could say they said it on the phone. You can certainly say it's going to be an extra charge, right? That's one of your options. And go and rewrite a good portion of the arrangement. But what will likely happen is that the artist will pretty much get upset and think you're trying to rip them off. If you say nothing, it's going to take you a lot more time to rearrange the song. So not that you have to start over from scratch, but you will have to spend significant amount of more time, incorporating the strings into the chart. Because typically you're talking about adding 20 strings. So sure, the artist won't be mad in this situation, but you will be quite upset about the extra time spent. So what would you do? Here's what I would do. I would try and get some information from the artist as to whether they love the first 2 charts that you did. Here's my reason and my thinking. I want to know if it's likely that they are going to hire me for more. If they seem completely happy and excited and even mention doing more charts in the future, I will likely bite the bullet and just tell the artist, okay, I didn't realize you wanted strings on this one. I'll have to do some rearranging, but I will make it happen. The reason I'll say it like this is to acknowledge a couple of things. Number one, I'm saying basically that I don't recall us, I don't recall us speaking about adding strings. So I'm saying and putting it out there that you don't recall that. And you've already acknowledged that you couldn't find anything about that in the texts and emails. Number two, it's also noting that you have to rearrange, which means doing extra work. So you're acknowledging to the artist that you're going to be doing some extra work. And finally, by saying you'll make it happen, it's saying you're dedicated to making the artist happy. And that is a positive thing for the artist. I would then try and offer some suggestions before doing, adding the strings. I'd offer the artist some suggestions as to songs that I think might be great for them in the future. Once again, hinting at hiring me to do more work. So while I might be upset at the extra work, and I likely will be upset at the extra work, I'm thinking more long-term, right? Again, I may not have won this particular battle, but hopefully I'm winning the war, which is to get more work. By the way, this may not pay off in the end, but it's better karma in the long run, and you'll have a much better chance of getting more work with this artist. All right, here is the final scenario, scenario 3. An artist who seems to be on the up and up asks if you want to play a gig with them at a festival. You look at the festival and it happens to be Coachella, which is a huge music festival here in California. And some of the acts that are going to be playing at the festival are, let's say, Foo Fighters, Billie Eilish, and SZA. You, of course, jump at the chance and agree to it, right? Of course, you're super excited. You ask for details, and they tell you where you're playing, what time you need to be there, and what to wear. Keep in mind now, everyone, for those that are not in California listening, Coachella is in the desert, roughly about 2 hours outside of LA. So it's definitely a trek. So you go to the gig and the performance is super fun and people are loving it and it's great. But you pay for parking. You don't get fed any meals. So you're paying out of pocket for meals. And it turns out that you never asked how much you were getting paid to do the gig. Definitely a huge mistake, folks, obviously. So you go back and check your emails and realize that they never told you what you were getting paid in the emails. So a couple of weeks go by and nothing is ever mentioned to you again. As of now, you are out of pocket $80 for gas, $40 for food, and $30 for parking, putting you at minus $150 to do this gig. What do you do? Here are my thoughts. First, bad on you for not finding out how much you were getting paid before you took the gig. Believe it or not, this happens way more frequently than not. Musicians are afraid to ask how much they are getting paid for fear of people thinking that they are, quote unquote, all about the money and not about the music. This is so typical of the music industry, by the way. You always need to know how much you are getting paid before you do a gig or you risk losing money. I'm going to say that one more time because it's so huge. For everyone out there, you always need to know how much money you're getting paid before you do a gig, or you risk losing money. You might be thinking maybe you just don't bring it up as you did this, as you did this big gig with this up and coming artist at this major festival, and it could be really good for you in the future. But the truth is, in this case, it's just not right what's happening. Here's what I would do. Obviously, you need to make sure you know how much you're getting paid in the future. But being that the gig is over at this point, covering your expenses is the priority. So I would email the artist and tell them you had a blast playing the gig and really look forward to working with them again. Notice how I started the email off with a positive, saying you enjoyed playing with them. I would then say the following. I can't remember if you were paying all of us musicians via Zelle or Venmo. Either way is fine, and here is my info for both. Did you notice the wording? I said, us musicians. Guess what? You are now not alone. I just made it a group thing. Now, I don't know if the other members of the group got paid or not, but that's kind of irrelevant right now. What I needed to do was make it so that it just wasn't about me. Second, even though they never stated the pay in the email, you basically told them, without saying as much, that you are a professional musician and you expect to get paid to play. That's what happens. So even if the artist had no intention on paying you, which is straight up just shitty, but happens, they now know they're going to need to respond. They can either respond with, thank you, I'll send X amount of money, which at this point, guys, you're just happy for whatever you get. You just, hopefully you'll cover your expenses. Or they can try and say some, BS about how there was no budget and, unfortunately they can't pay you. If this is the case, I would respond by saying the following. Thank them for the response. And you say, okay, I didn't realize there was no pay for this gig. While I really enjoyed playing the gig, most of us musicians had to drive from LA, which is a 2-hour drive, and we had to pay for parking and food. I'm definitely a team player, and while I usually don't do gigs for free, I realized we never discussed payment up front. But was wondering if you could at least reimburse for gas, parking, and food so that I'm not out of pocket for the gig. Now, the artist may respond and say, sorry, they can't do that. But the vast majority of time, they will at least offer you some sort of money because they will usually know it's wrong what they are doing. Even if they lost money on the gig, they should know it's wrong to have you go drive 2 hours and be out of pocket, completely, and you're having to pay for parking. It's just absolute crap. Most people will feel like shit about it, and you'll get something. Who knows what it will be, but even if it's $50, it's better than nothing at this point. The bottom line is, if they don't offer anything, I highly recommend that you not play with them anymore. At the very least, if they call you again and you need the gig, you must ask how much you're getting paid. Us musicians are getting taken advantage of all the time, and it has to stop. I know we all need to eat, and I know that there are extenuating circumstances for a lot of people. I get it. But all you're doing in the long run is hurting yourself and hurting all the other musicians, because if people get away with this shit, it will never end. And it has gotten to the point where it's like, you feel bad about asking how much you're getting paid to provide a service for someone. Remember, you've practiced and worked really hard to do a great job at whatever, type of music you're playing, and the fact that someone is not even willing to acknowledge that you are playing for them by any sort of financial means is absolutely absurd and unacceptable. So make sure you know what you're getting paid. And, I recommend that you never do anything for free. I know a lot of older musicians are always like, well, you got to pay your dues. And I've said this before on the pod, paying your dues doesn't mean you play for free or you do stupid shit, right? Paying your dues means you just have to work really hard in the beginning and even the middle of your career to try to, hustle and make sure things are happening. Yeah, sure, you may not be getting, top rate, but you should at least be getting some sort of a living wage. Folks, there you have it. 3 different real-life scenarios, and it's very likely you have had to deal with at least one of those so far. And if you haven't, hopefully you'll know what to do moving forward. If you have any suggestions for future scenarios that you'd like me to discuss on the pod, I think this is a really fun thing to do. So email me or hit me on Instagram and let me know, and I'll discuss your topic on air. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today's episode. If you aren't already, please subscribe to this pod so you can stay up to date with new shows, giveaways, and more importantly, the concerts, folks. Come see my big band at Vibrato. We play there usually every 2 to 3 months. It's a blast. Everyone has a great time. The music's fantastic. And I think you'll have just a wonderful evening of music. You can also follow me on Instagram at SpicyGMusic or check out my website, jasongoldmanmusic.com, to see what projects I'm currently working on and to see when I'll be performing next. You can also sign up for the email list there. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Much love. Peace.